he's working gold mines and the Civil War. Does someone just say, hey, this is what I really like to do, and then does he go lobby the powers that be and say, I want to do this, or did they reach out for him?
They reached out for him. It was kind of like Washington retreating to the farm, and you know, the classic, you know, they called him out. What happened with Olmsted is he had one masterpiece to his credit, pre-Civil War, and that was Central Park. Then during the Civil War, no opportunities obviously for park making. He gets involved in this medical relief outfit that years later morphs into the Red Cross. Tail end of the Civil War, he goes out and works in a gold mine in California. But when the Civil War ends, there's a real economic boom in the North at least, and all these cities start clamoring for parks. And so he and his partner Vaux from Central Park, they reunite, and Buffalo, Chicago, Rochester, ultimately Boston, all these cities start calling on Olmsted. So he's called to become a landscape architect at that point.
And he's probably worth a lot of money at this point.
He's worth a lot of money. He never, you know, he's worth a lot of money. He's often able to command an impressive fee, particularly for a endeavor that he kind of invented. He and Vaux were the pioneers in the United States, at least, of landscape architecture. He's able to command a handsome fee, but it doesn't make him a rich man.
Oh.
Yep, yep.
So much work went into it, and
yeah, so much work went into it. It's again, it's a kind of a something that existed in the 19th century more than it exists today. I mean, here was a person who, you know, by late in his career, he was almost a household name. He was at one point a vice presidential candidate, granted for a very splinter of a splinter party. But it gives you some idea of his very high public profile, and yet different era. He wasn't able to convert that into great wealth, but you know, it was a different time. So he had a high public profile and led a upper middle class life, you might say.
They don't pay royalties on parks.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, that might have been one of the problems. Absolutely.
And you know, they could have charged a nickel admission or whatever, a penny.
Yeah, there was talk. You know, Central Park was at the time of Central Park. There was a lot of talk about a for-profit park before Central Park, a public park, got designed. That might have made him a richer man if that became the standard.
So, Greenspan and Nader, were they on the same imprints, or?
Yeah, they were. They were all published by Perseus Books Group, but they were published by different arms of the Perseus empire.
So, did you say to your agent or to Perseus, "Hey, it's time for this"?
I did, in fact. Yeah, it's a topic I got real excited about, and I got in contact actually with my editor for the previous book, for the Ralph Nader book. I said, you know, this is one I was really passionate about, and she totally agreed with me, and off we went.
You know, speaking of Nader, back in 2000, I was a program director of AM 1670. We were the only station that broadcast Nader from the Fleet Center.
That's how funny, yeah. No, he made a lot of enemies in that time. It
was craziness. So I called my footage of it, my film footage of it, Whacktivism 101, because it attracted every kind of person on the fringe.
Yeah.
You had the kids from Emerson College on soapboxes reading poetry outside of the Fleet Center, and then you had Nader there giving his speech, and WCAT Winthrop, where I'm a member, they filmed Nader. So I saw them filming Nader. I went up and down the aisles filming all the crazies.
That's great.
And they saw the camera, and they, you know.
No, I always thought it was really funny that Nader Nader is he's an establishment figure in one way from the standpoint, you know, he went to Harvard and Princeton, you know, he was a power broker in Washington, and he intermingled his fate with the Green Party. And so all of a sudden Nader, this very serious, accomplished guy, he threw in his lot with a lot of, as you described, fringes and crazies. I always wondered how he would, you know, it must have been tough for him to go to some of those Green Party rallies and have to address a huge crowd of people, you know, reading poetry and so forth.
Well, the thing that it did was the Green Party attracted every other party.
Mm-hmm.
So I have presidential candidates from all these other parties on tape because they all came to this event. It wasn't a Green Party event. It was like the multi-event of everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
If you weren't Democrat or Republican, you were at wherever Nader went.
Mm-hmm.
So that was an interesting aspect of that election year.
It was. So it was a fascinating episode. That's actually what inspired. I mean, that inspired me to write that book, coupled with the fact that when I was in college, I saw Nader deliver just easily the most electrifying speech I've ever heard, which is strange to think, but Nader can really command a crowd. So.
Well, Unsafe at Any Speed is brilliant,
mm-hmm.
and
yes,
it was timely.
Mm-hmm.
It's like major whistleblower, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I love No Contest, Corporate Lawyers and the Perversion of Justice in America. He did this with Wesley J. Smith.
Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
And I just think it's a wonderful book, but, you know, then there's someone else.
Especially the party, yep.
You know, he's a figure. And then Greenspan is similar controversy.
Yeah, Greenspan has experienced a real sort of, I guess, a pendulum swing, you might say. I think he was way too hallowed early on. I mean, people seem to think that, you know, he might be controlling the weather or something. I don't know. He was given huge credit, maybe far beyond what he was due. Now, I personally think that he's given more. I think he was given too much credit. I think the pendulum swung. Now I think he's given too much blame. I mean, he wasn't the sole controller of the economy, and he's not the only person responsible for the housing crisis and everything. But, you know, he certainly wasn't. He wasn't the prescient, all-knowing figure that you know, people made him out to be. That's for sure. So,
which came first? I'm sorry.
Greenspan was first. The first book I wrote. Yeah.
So Greenspan came first, and as you're working on Greenspan, are you thinking of Nader and Olmsted?
Wasn't really thinking of Nader. What happened with I finished the Greenspan book. I was casting about for a next book project, and I had some relatives who were younger than me who voted for Nader, and I would ask them. I'd say, "Well, why did you vote for him?" And I realized that they didn't even know about Unsafe at Any Speed. They didn't even know about the book. They didn't know about his whole career as a consumer activist in you know, back in the 70s and late 60s. And so I thought, well, here's a figure who obviously has interested a whole new generation, yet this whole new generation, in some cases, at least the people I knew, didn't know about this other chapter. I thought, it's time to do a Nader biography that kind of brings it all together. So that was kind of the genesis of that project.
I find that shocking because one of the reasons I was tempted to, but I didn't vote for him, because Unsafe at Any Speed was so important.
Yeah, because you knew all that history. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of people, like the young relatives I referred to, I think they knew sort of vaguely he was this important guy who helped, you know, do some things for us, but, you know, they couldn't identify Unsafe at Any Speed, what that was or what it was about, and they didn't know anything about Nader's Raiders or any of those episodes. So I thought, you know, as I said, kind of a good time to kind of synthesize, to bring together the old Nader and the presidential candidate and tell the full story.
My feeling is that he had all this wonderful street cred and other, he had his chips, and he kind of cashed them in and threw away all his goodwill he had earned.
He did. It's sad. I mean, he came to the conclusion that the only way he could get in our media frantic society, the only way he could get on the radar screen was he was going to have to run for president. He was well aware that running for president, you know, that he was not going to be able to win. But he thought that's a way to get issues out, you know, his issues out there. And he that was already kind of a somewhat corrupt premise. But then I think he got lost in it, got power hungry, enjoyed the attention, and then he became just a sort of a fly into it. And it's really sad because here's something I personally think history will treat him much more kindly than it will Alan Greenspan. I think ultimately he'll be recognized for all the lives he saved and all the good work he did. But he has a whole last chapter of his life that's hard to reconcile. I mean, he's interfered in the process basically, and as he said, he squandered a huge amount of goodwill he'd built up.
And Greenspan, you know, however that plays out, I guess Olmsted is much safer.
Olmsted is, yeah, for sure. I was actually talking to my publicist there before when we were having lunch. We were agreeing, unless they dig up some kind of ancient, astounding scandal about the man, I think his reputation is assured. So,
which they probably won't, because you've done more investigating of him than has anyone else done something as thorough as this.
Nobody's done anything as thorough. It's a biography in that fashion. There are, believe it or not, there are 7 gigantic volumes of letters and bric-a-brac that Charles Beveridge, who's a superb scholar, has spent his professional career compiling. It was an invaluable resource for this book. I mean, I pored over these 7 volumes, but as you might imagine, these 7 volumes, they don't have the arc or feel of a biography. I mean,
right.
They are for the faithful. They are for, you know, a landscape architecture historian might be willing to pour through over 7, and we're talking about 7, 6, and 700-page volumes. But, you know, you're not going to be able to read those volumes and come away with any sense of his life story. You're going to be too much forest to see the trees in that. But as I said, Charles Beveridge, that work is landmark work, and I could not have done my biography if it hadn't been for his excellent efforts throughout many years.
The appendix, the Olmsted Views, shows that you saw the forest and the trees.
Yes, I tried to do that. Yeah, I got to see some forest. I saw some trees.
Seeing both is very important.
Yes, Did my best.
Justin writes, I enjoyed visiting all these incredible sites while researching this book. For each, I've selected choice spots, some of which are remarkably unsullied and have changed little in appearance since Olmsted's day. That's remarkable.
Yeah, no,
you said remarkably.
It is remarkable. I mean, and bear in mind, I'm describing here sites within parks. I mean, there are some parks that literally the whole park is stayed, but in a lot of cases, what I tried to do is I tried to find a view within the park that was true to Olmsted's vision. Of course, you walk away from that view and you might look a different direction. You might see, a parking lot full of cars. So
well, you've got here, of course, you'll have to use your imagination to shut out the cars and people using cell phones. One of the things I like to do if I go to Maine, you get away from the smog, if there is any smog, and you get away from all the lights, and you can see the stars much more in a crisp reality that you don't get in the city. Are these parks like Oakland, California, Mountain View Cemetery, do you have that look in the sky that is set apart from the city?
Yeah, one thing that's wonderful is some of these parks really do. You do have even Central Park in New York, if you visit, one of the things that's wonderful is if you feel comfortable going into certain parts of the park, and you maybe don't want to do it at 2 in the morning, you really can
knowing New York, not I.
Well, you can actually, at night, you can get different sounds. You can get bird sounds. The sky looks different. You're certainly aware that the city's nearby, but you can get a very different feel. Something like Mountain View Cemetery in Oakland, it's a beautiful cemetery. And one of the things that's great is when Olmsted designed it, has the same view it had when Olmsted designed it. When he designed it, you were looking at 2 boom towns. You're looking at Oakland and San Francisco. They were boom towns then. Now you have the same view. It's just those are, you've got the classic San Francisco skyline, you've got Oakland's skyline, so you're looking at the same view. It's just those cities are 21st century cities now.
That's amazing. Yosemite, California, now everyone loves Yosemite. Olmsted was an environmentalist before the term even existed. He led the early efforts to preserve the natural wonder. Now people don't think of gold miners and environmentalists in the same breath.
That's a great point. It's one of the things I found most amusing in doing my research is this was the 19th century and irony didn't really exist. And so Olmsted took a job as a gold mine operator. 30 miles away is Yosemite, and he starts calling for the preservation of Yosemite. Now he's supervising a gold mine. This gold mine is despoiling mountainsides, tearing them apart. But it never even occurs to Olmsted because, as I said, it's a pre-ironic age, a pre-media age, and so he feels perfectly comfortable operating a gold mine, noticing Yosemite 30 miles away, feeling it's beautiful, and making a passionate cry to keep unchecked mercantile interests, such as gold mines, from despoiling Yosemite. So, different times.
That's hilarious. and these are the days before fracking.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, fracking. He didn't have to make a passionate call against fracking. Yes, fortunately.
And things that are I don't know what's worse than fracking, but there's things like chopping off mountaintops.
Yeah.
These horrible practices. Would he have been? He would have been a staunch opponent, no doubt.
Well, not only was a staunch opponent, but I described this sort of the Yosemite episode where he was actually supervising a gold mine, but that was a job he only held for a year or two. Then, as a park maker, he'd be traveling all over the U.S. working on park commissions. He got to know the U.S. better than most people, and he'd be looking out the windows of trains and stagecoaches, and he started to notice that even in the 19th century, the country was under siege, and the natural spots in the country were under siege already. There was big timber cutting down trees, and it was kind of this myth in America at that point that America was just limitless. It was a primeval forest that could never be despoiled. Olmsted became aware more than most people that was not the case. That actually that a lot of wild spaces were under siege, and so that accounted for why he kind of wore a second hat. He was a park maker throughout the latter part of his career, and he's also an early environmentalist who would often make these kind of clarion calls that a place like Niagara Falls should be preserved.
It was the conscience over the gold mine.
Yeah.
So we...
Yeah, you're probably right.
I'm just guessing. I'm just the outsider.
Works for me.
You are from, you said it earlier, but Forest Hills Gardens, New York.
Yeah.
You're in Winchester now. Before my next topic here, let's ask where you've been roaming the country with the book?
Yeah, for the book I couldn't call it exactly, not quite an Olmstedian roaming of the country, but I've been to Chicago and Washington and New York and Boston and a few other places, ultimately going out to Kansas City.
Now, while writing the book, you were at some of these places, so you're going back to where you worked to now promote.
Exactly. Exactly.
Do you bring the wife and kids to these journeys?
It's funny you should ask. One of the places I'm going in January is Palm Springs. That one, they'll be going along. That's Palm Springs, Florida in January. These other events, they've been a little bit busy for the, I've got two 9-year-old twins, and they'd be kind of at wit's end if they had to, sort of wait around.
Twins, that must be fun.
It is fun, yeah.
Double trouble.
Yep.
There's nothing in Palm Springs with him, right?
Nothing with him whatsoever. I was surprised when the opportunity came my way. It's just there's a landscape architecture conference being held there, and so of course he's topic A for that. But it's being held in a place where he did no work. I don't think he did any work in the state of Florida at all.